Ride the signal through the unknown. This is the cryptic current.
The philosopher who stands first among the 7 sages of Greece, the man known as the father of science, Thales, asserted that all things originate from water. Water is the origin of the world. The 7 sages of Greece each left behind a maxim, and the motto of Thales is that water is best. Lao Tzu said, "The highest goodness is like water. Water benefits all things without striving to act on what people dislike, therefore in accordance with the way." He said that the highest virtue is like water. It envelops all things without contending. No ordinary awareness, no contention for immediate, reaching the softest wisdom and spirit, capable of encompassing all under heaven. In Taoist philosophy, water is considered benevolent and yielding, the most excellent and softest of all. The nature of water is profound. When small, it is tranquil. When large, it surges with immense, not contending, yet embracing all things. Have you ever wondered why water makes up to 70% of the human body's weight? Why do humans go without food for many days but cannot do without water? Have you ever wondered what the earth would be like if ice didn't float on water? Why are there no 2 identical snowflakes on Earth? And in a drop of water lies the image of another world? Water is one of the things we encounter most frequently. But have we ever missed many things because we don't understand water? A recent study by the Gothenburg University Institute of Aviation and Space, water has memory, and this statement could completely change our view of the world. So what does this mean? Could this be the reason why ancient philosophers believed that water is the origin of all things? For all things, water is the most fundamental element. So far, human intelligence is gradually expanding. Awareness of water has also made remarkable progress. Today we will talk together about the memory of water. Hello everyone, I am Miss Ruby. Although water is extremely common, we actually don't understand much about it. There are many phenomena related to water that have not yet been explained. For example, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, which everyone knows. However, there is a very rare phenomenon that people might not pay much attention to. That is the volume of ice being greater than the volume of water. Normally, when a gas turns into a liquid, and a liquid turns into a solid, the volume continuously decreases. That is, the density will continuously increase. But water is not like other things. When transitioning from liquid to solid, the volume of water actually increases. The density decreases, so ice floats on the surface of the water. It is precisely because water has this property that it has saved all life in the world. Why do you say that? We have previously discussed that the Earth has experienced many ice ages. That is, when entering this period, the Earth will become very cold. The entire Earth turns into an ice ball. So why don't all animals die? That is because when the weather turns cold, the water on the Earth's surface will immediately freeze, and forming a layer of ice. This ice layer prevented the outside cold air from reaching the water inside, preventing the water temperature from continuing to decrease. Moreover, sunlight can penetrate through the ice into the water. This ensures the interior remains warm, allowing marine life and freshwater organisms to survive inside. If ice were heavier and sank immediately to the bottom after freezing, continuously freezing and sinking to the bottom, then the water would completely freeze, and everything would be frozen solid inside. Additionally, the freezing point of water is not fixed, with ordinary water freezing at 0 degrees Celsius. But if it freezes slowly, then it doesn't freeze at 0 degrees Celsius, but below 0 degrees Celsius. That is to say, there could be water even at minus 10 degrees Celsius to minus 20 degrees Celsius. This water is called supercooled water. Currently, the slow freezing limit is minus 48 degrees, meaning that above minus 48 degrees Celsius, liquid water can potentially exist. Only after dropping below minus 48 degrees Celsius will it definitely turn into ice, regardless of speed. Why exactly this happens remains unknown to this day. Moreover, ice formed at this temperature is different from ordinary ice. It looks like ice, but its internal molecular structure is very chaotic. Normally, the molecular structure of solids is very orderly, so by definition, they are not solids but liquids. But on the surface, they appear solid. So ultimately, whether they are solid or liquid remains undecided in the scientific community to this day. Additionally, Stockholm University in Sweden also conducted experiments. They discovered that water is actually composed of two types of liquid. These two liquids are not water, and what they are is unknown. And they cannot be separated. And furthermore, in 2017, a study conducted by the University of Oxford in the UK showed when water is between 40 degrees Celsius and 60 degrees Celsius, a phase transition occurs. That is to say, water below 40 degrees Celsius and water above 60 degrees Celsius are not the same thing. And another issue is, where does the water on Earth come from? This is also an unsolved mystery. Currently, the academic world is divided. One believes that Earth originally had water, meaning that when Earth was born, it already had water. We previously discussed that Earth might have had life when it was formed. And life requires water, so it's very likely that Earth had water from the beginning. But this contradicts the current mainstream theory of Earth's formation. Currently, Earth is thought to have formed from a Big Bang within the solar system, and that all existing planets were born. Planets closer to the Sun are composed of rock, while planets farther from the Sun are gaseous. So Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars are all rocky planets. But among them, only Earth has water, which is strange. So to this day, the origin of Earth's water remains undecided. There is an extremely marvelous phenomenon that surely everyone has heard of, which is that in this world, no two snowflakes are exactly alike. So how do we know this? The world's earliest researcher of snowflakes was Wilson Bentley. Born in 1865, at age 15, his family bought him a microscope. The very first time he saw snowflakes under the microscope, Bentley was deeply captivated. And from then until his death, his entire 51-year life was dedicated to just one thing. He photographed over 5,300 snowflake pictures, discovering that no snowflakes were identical. In the 1880s, cameras of that time were very complex and difficult to use. Yet he managed to photograph snowflakes through a microscope. Truly amazing. After discovering that over 5,000 of these photos showed no snow crystals. And so this matter gained public attention for the first time. Before that, people didn't pay attention to this issue. It turned out all snowflakes were different. Water is truly a miraculous substance. In the video about the non-rotting apple by Kimura, we also mentioned Japanese Dr. Masaru Emoto's research on water crystals. And his astonishing research was actually inspired by the phenomenon mentioned earlier about no two snowflakes being identical in this world. In daily life, you can meet someone who fluently understands 2 or more languages. You'd probably admire and praise that person as excellent, right? Yet according to Dr. Emoto's research, water can apparently read and understand written words in different languages, and even express itself through the formation of water crystals. Starting in 1994, Masaru Emoto used high-speed photography in cold rooms to photograph and observe water crystals. They put the same water into different bottles, wrote different words on paper, and pasted these words facing inward so the water could read them. Thank you. Thank you. All look like jewels, symmetrical, beautiful enough to move people's hearts. You fool. You make me sick, I will kill you. Wisdom. Angel. Devil. Professor Emoto conducted another shocking experiment. He placed rice in 3 experimental glass cups and filled them with water. Thank you. While completely ignoring the 3rd cup. Thank you. The rice in the 2nd cup had completely turned black, and the rice in the cup that Emoto ignored had molded. Professor Emoto believed this experiment taught an extremely important lesson, particularly regarding how to treat children. Ignoring and being indifferent is the most damaging action. We should give them more care, encouragement, and conversation. This might not be easy to maintain regularly, but it always achieves results. In recent research on the structure of water droplets, conducted by Professor Problet at the Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, University of Stuttgart, Germany, inside each water droplet there is a beautifully imaged world. Each water droplet's image is unique, which is astonishing. Why does each water droplet have such different shapes and postures? The research team discovered this is because the information carried by each water droplet is different. Water is like humans, it will remember the things it has experienced, recording the images of those things. Scientists conducted an experiment like this. Place a flower in a cup of water, then remove the flower after a while, and discover that this water reveals the image of that flower. Moreover, this image can be seen in every single drop of water in the cup. If using a different type of flower for the experiment, the result is the same. For example, using American carnation for the experiment, the image that appears in the water is also the shape of the American carnation. And this led to the conclusion that water has memory. However, gaining this recognition was a process of waiting for change through difficult trials, even sacrifices. In 2009, a thesis was presented by Luc Montagnier, a French virologist, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2008. In the thesis, he introduced a new discovery of his. He said that by diluting a water solution containing viral DNA to the point of theoretically pure water, that is to say, after making the water reach a state of no impurities, the characteristics previously present in the viral DNA would still exist in the purified water after dilution. It's as if this pure water carries a certain characteristic. Moreover, these DNA characteristics can be remotely transferred to another sample of pure water. That is, water not only has memory but also has the superpower of instant teleportation, academically referred to as remote DNA transfer. But is this possible? Of course, after the thesis was presented, the academic world was in an uproar. Everyone thought this was truly a fairy tale, too fantastical. But Montagnier said he had started conducting this research in 2005. The experiment is repeatable, and the results are verifiable. His thesis is trustworthy. 1 year later, in 2010, at the Conference of Nobel Laureates held in Germany, Montagnier again shared his discovery. At that conference, there were 60 Nobel laureates and over 700 scientists. After listening, everyone shook their heads and even criticized Montagnier. They said, "Don't stand up to validate unscientific homeopathic therapies that harm people anymore." Homeopathy mentioned here is a treatment method using highly diluted medicines to cure diseases. We will discuss this in detail later. And Montagnier's public sharing this time led to a huge wave of criticism. It caused him, despite having won the Nobel Prize in Medicine, to lose research funding and have no choice but to go abroad to make a living. Even that Christmas was not peaceful. However, regarding all this, Montagnier had no regrets. Fortunately, on Christmas Eve, a science magazine published an interview with Montagnier. In the interview, he finally found an opportunity to speak up. He said that his experiment was not pseudoscience, and he was not a fraud. These contents are all real phenomena and very worthy of further research. In 2013, Montagnier collaborated with a television station to produce a documentary titled, "We Have Found the Memory of Water." In the film, they restored the original state of this experiment. This experiment not only involved the steps used to dilute the water, but also used content regarding electromagnetic waves. First, they prepared a portion of water solution that once contained viral DNA, and after removing all the DNA, they performed dilution. After dilution, they proceeded with testing. The detection device picked up a low-frequency electronic signal. They converted this signal into a 6-second audio segment, then emailed it to the collaborating team in Italy. After the research team in Italy received the audio segment, they played it continuously for 1 hour into another distilled water sample. Then, they poured the distilled water sample exposed to this sound into a machine, a device used for DNA synthesis. With additional information, this machine could synthesize corresponding content into DNA. And right here, the miracle occurred. The DNA produced by the device and the original DNA from Paris had up to 98% similarity. This meant that the DNA from Paris, through such a sequence of operations, had been successfully copied to Italy. And water served as the intermediary, not only capable of hearing and recording, but also transmitting and receiving signals. Doesn't this suggest that water has spiritual? This is the entire experimental process. When mentioned, we find water truly miraculous. However, after the documentary was broadcast, the reaction didn't change much. Although no one publicly criticized, neither did anyone enthusiastically praise. In other words, people still respected Montaigne. The person whom Montaigne called the modern Galileo, Jacques Benveniste, faced a much more miserable situation. Benveniste was a very famous French immunologist. He once served as director of the French National Institute of Health and Medical Research, published over 300 academic papers and books in his career. Could be said to be a person of high virtue. However, all his glory and reputation suddenly ended in 1988. Because that year he published a paper about water having memory in the journal Nature. Benveniste discovered that if human immunoglobulin E antibody was diluted, to the point where theoretically it was no different from pure water, this water still retained the antibody's toxicity. After multiple experiments, he concluded that water has memory capability. This paper truly caused a sensation. Doesn't it affirm that water has spiritual properties? Such arguments were considered unscientific by many. Therefore, as soon as the paper was published, the journal's editorial team was thunderstruck. After recovering, everyone immediately became agitated, and so they sent a 3-person team to investigate, frankly speaking, to refute. This team observed 3 consecutive experiments. Afterwards, one team member directly participated in the 4th experiment. Each experiment was successful. Therefore, based on the experiments, the view that water has memory capability could be confirmed as correct. The investigation team was also helpless, but their mission was still to come and refute. So they decided to change the experimental conditions. For example, it required applying the double-blind method, meaning wrapping the experimental samples with and hanging the samples from the ceiling, meaning adding many additional conditions. With this method, water could no longer see or hear, and the experiment seemed to no longer work. And then they hastily concluded that Benveniste's experiment was unreliable. Everyone, look at the experiment we conducted. Water isn't that miraculous. Soon after, Nature published a new article, issuing a rather arrogant correction. Rumors spread everywhere. Within a short time, Benveniste became considered a fraud in academic circles. His reputation plummeted uncontrollably, his laboratory was closed, funding was cut, and he himself became a laughable Nobel laureate scientist. No magazine wanted to publish his articles anymore. In modern terms, Benveniste was silenced, but many scholars did not witness these actions firsthand. They stepped forward one by one to demand justice for Benveniste. Some said, out of 7 experiments, only 3 were inaccurate, and these 3 were affected by procedural changes, so the blame shouldn't fall on the performer. Others mentioned that other labs had conducted similar experiments. Before drawing conclusions, why didn't the journal contact them for potential evidence? Moreover, scholars pointed out that the observer effect should be considered in this experiment. This effect often occurs in microphysics, suggesting that the observer's will can influence experimental results. Increasing human body energy. In summary, if the subconscious of the 3 survey team members was too strong, it could also affect the experiment's outcome. Faced with all this, Benveniste did not defend himself but did not abandon his research either. By the 1990s, he proposed a new view. Water's memory can be digitized, transmitted, and inserted into other water samples. At that time, people could hardly accept this information. This experiment has now confirmed that Benveniste That's just a pity that Benveniste passed away in 2004 and didn't. If water having memory is real, doesn't it provide a chemical basis for the homeopathic therapy we just mentioned? Homeopathic therapy. First, let's understand what homeopathic therapy is. Western medicine believes that symptoms are the root of the disease, so eliminating symptoms means curing the disease. According to this theory, high blood pressure requires blood pressure medication, and fever requires. This treatment method is called allopathic therapy, while homeopathy treats in the opposite way. Therefore, homeopathy is also known as the therapy of similars. Homeopathic therapy believes that symptoms like coughing, fever, and diarrhea are not the root of the disease but the body's way of eliminating the illness. For example, when ingesting poison, humans vomit and have diarrhea. Here, the poison is the root of the disease, while vomiting and diarrhea are the body's attempts to expel the toxin, thereby achieving the goal of healing. For instance, onions can cause sneezing. So medicine containing onion components can be used to treat rhinitis with sneezing as the main symptom. However, medicines that increase disease symptoms are often highly toxic, so what should be done? Samuel Hahnemann, the father of homeopathic therapy, said, "Easy, we just dilute the medicine." However, during the dilution process, he discovered a very strange phenomenon. If the medicine is diluted in a 1:99 ratio, and placed in a glass bottle, and shaken vigorously 100 times, the toxicity is removed, but the therapeutic effect increases. As shaken, the effect not only doesn't organon of the medical art. And this became the basis for later homeopathic therapy, using highly diluted medicines to treat diseases. Even some medications are diluted to the point of being pure water by physical definition. Doesn't this align with the earlier view that water has memory? However, at this point, the scientific community becomes uneasy because they think, aren't you saying that plain water can cure diseases? According to current theory, this cannot be clearly explained, and without explanation, the scientific community won't accept it. Of course, the homeopathic community also admits there isn't much scientific basis yet. Mean it. It might just be that we don't have enough evidence yet. As you can see, the effectiveness of homeopathic therapy is 41%, while Western medicine is 44%, almost the same rate. In fact, aspirin, the familiar fever and pain reducer, was widely used for over 70 years before scientists discovered its mechanism of action. Over 2,400 years ago, our ancestors discovered that willow bark contains aspirin components that can cure diseases. But at that time, there were no scientific theories or experiments to verify it. People use it simply because they find it effective, that's all. Therefore, homeopathy practitioners argue that you can say we haven't found the scientific mechanism of this therapy. But you cannot call us unscientific. In fact, whether it's Jack Benveniste, Luc Montagnier, or Japanese Dr. Masaru Emoto, their experiments could all become evidence for homeopathy therapy. However, they never claimed to officially endorse this therapy. They only based on research and published some of their findings. But the reaction from the scientific community seems a bit too strong. So why does the scientific community have such a different view of homeopathy therapy? Doesn't everyone say that technological development must focus on innovation? And the meaning of innovation is to break through, to shatter old concepts, or to overcome outdated perceptions. If no one dares to experiment with it just because no scientific basis has been found, then innovation would lose its meaning, it would no longer be innovation. And science couldn't develop either. Isn't this way of looking at problems becoming the biggest barrier for the scientific community? If we could verify, break through and develop together, perhaps the results would be more ideal. I wonder what you think about this. Do you find some characteristics of water quite similar to humans? Would understanding more about water change your perspective on things? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below the video. Our sharing session today ends here. If you found the video useful, don't forget to share it with your friends. Thank you very much. Goodbye and see you again. Subscribe to the Guianigo channel.
If the signal hooked you, subscribe and catch the next ripple.